Alright, so I think we've seen enough of what Season 6 has to offer by this point, and it's time to update the top 3 gods for each role to reflect the changes to the meta we've seen with the release of the new season. So for anyone not familiar, if this is your first time watching, this is a series I make that I usually update regularly once there's a significant meta shift, and it's meant to just be a quick way for you guys to see what's good at the moment, maybe what you should be banning or picking if you really want those wins. This is mainly aimed at ranked and casual conquest, with some influence taken from competitive Smite, and hopefully a shorter video with just the juiciest bits of the meta rather than like an entire tier list will be a bit easier for you to digest. But without further ado, let's jump straight into the gods I have here, starting it off with my favourite role, the solo laners. So first up is King Arthur. So with Arthur being a recent release, it's fairly safe to assume he's a bit overtuned. High-res are yet to conjure up any nerfs for the one true king, and as he is right now with his abuse of Gladiator Shield, crazy mobility and solid damage, just makes him one of the easiest solo laners to carry on. Just get past his relatively weak early laning phase and you're pretty much good to go. He spikes insanely hard in the mid game to the point where you can easily 1v2 or even more depending on how fed you are. His teamfight is arguably a little weaker on average than other solo laners, but you're often coming in off a huge lead, and a lot of the time you can just win the game just off of his insane laning phase and 1v1 fights. He's just a really solid solo right now. Solo number 2 is Vamana. So Arthur is often banned, and my fallback currently would definitely be Vamana. He's not really actually banned that much considering how powerful he really is. He plays very differently to Arthur, but in my opinion is nearly as powerful and can actually hard carry a game even better, I think. Once again, his early game is somewhat weak, but once you reach that mid to late game with Vamana, he's an absolute horror to deal with, assuming he's not counterpicked by something like an Odin or a Serket. So watch out for those types of picks and you should be good to go stomping onto the enemy backline with this pick right now. And the final solo laner is Bellona. So Bellona just seems to always be pretty good, but especially with the advent of the new season with her buffs and other solo lane picks being good matchups for her, she's really making a splash right now. She's a step down from the other two I've mentioned in terms of power level, but she's often one of few ways to deal with Arthur or Vamana just by shutting them down hard in the laning phase, getting pressure and rotating hard. Plus of course she has excellent totem pressure and can often win out securing it against most gods. Bellona's usually not going to completely hard carry a game for you, but with a competent team comp built around her, Bellona can be extremely dominant right now, especially because not many people expect it. Alright, so let's move on to some junglers. The first one being Alkaline. So it's one of those times again, it always seems like there's just something that happens every now and then, and Alkaline, despite only minor changes, manages to just take over the meta completely. Assuming he's not banned, Alkaline is one of the hardest carries you can put in the jungle role right now, and with his new passive, it can offer him a bit of a better time early on, and once he gets like 3 items done, he just absolutely shreds through like entire teams. Especially given he has that execute to take out high HP enemies once they get low and reset to either go back in, and squishies just absolutely melt under Alkaline. He can be shut down early in the game, but if that doesn't happen, Ao is an absolute monster right now. The second jungler would be Bakuca. So Bakuca has been pretty strong to straight up OP for the last few months, and I think he's still worth a pickup for the jungle role if better picks aren't available. His ability to farm up is basically unparalleled by any other jungler, given he has the Eat minion to sustain up and secure buffs. He can easily invade enemy buffs with little to no risk just because he can eat that shit and run away last spamming. And there's almost no way you can stop him doing that without hard committing to like a rotation of a few people to kill him. You can even build Golden Blade if you want to get your farm to just skyrocket. And then of course once you get a few items done on Bakuca just does Bakuca things, absolutely destroying an entire backline before the tanks can even try to peel. He's just an extremely solid jungler right now if you like those snowbally type of picks. And the final jungler I recommend will be Ratatoskr. So Rat seems to be the go-to early pressure jungler right now, where Bakuca aims more at mid-game stomping and Alkaline definitely looks at that late game. Rat fills that void of wanting to win early and win hard. His ganks are basically uncontested after level 5 because other top picks like Bakuca and Alkaline can't follow that semi-global ultimate whatsoever, meaning he often gets some free ganks with no response from the enemy jungler and can snowball his lane super hard from that. It's especially good when you can rotate hard on duo and snowball that early on, as duo lane winning is often like the most important lane currently with all the high pressure supports being played. And of course he still has that dumb Acorn build where he can get 50 power and 20% movement speed super early in the game, which once again allows him to just roam uncontested and shut down other picks like Alkaline super hard in the early game. His late game does suffer a little bit, but you can build him tanky later on and still do pretty good work in team fights as well. Okay, let's talk a bit about some mid laners. So Merlin would be my first up. So assuming the Master Wizard isn't permabanned in every game you play, he's definitely hands down the best mid lane pick right now, potentially even the best god in the game. In terms of total damage output he can throw out in a fight, no one can match him straight up. Between all the stand switching and just raw damage of his abilities, no one's even close in terms of pure damage in fights. He does lack a little in the strong CC department, but assuming that can be provided by other members of your team, which is usually a safe assumption to make, he can just wreck entire teams with his stupid damage and zoning potential. Like, just Bakuca swap in, drop both fire stance abilities, and you just deleted the enemy mid just like that. It's really insane. While he does lack a little bit in the early game due to mostly safety because of the long cooldown on the blink, once he gets past around level 4, he's near unstoppable with adequate peel and setup. Mid laner number 2, Raijin. So Raijin is a bit of a weird one. There's nothing specifically in this meta that should really make him that strong, yet here he is, doing very well for himself in the mid lane right now. His early pressure is really good and he can often outclear a lot of the top mid laners right now. He also does really well at speed buff as well, getting to mid lane quickly. And his burst is just crazy. Even just the 2-into-1 combo can do like 70% of a squishy's health in a late game teamfight. And his ultimate, if you have good setup and you can use the 100% damage burst, can chunk for like 20% of someone's health per hit, while also still having that flexibility and power of the fear and taunt options as well. Plus, he's reasonably safe with the dash as well. It's a little risky because he is still targetable for a bit while he jumps, but it can go over walls, and it's a generally pretty good mage movement ability. Raijin is just really solid at all stages of the game. It's really hard to pinpoint a weak time he has and then shut him down, which makes him all the more strong this season. And the final mid laner I recommend is Hera. I think Hera competes really well with most of the top gods right now. Her and Raijin are on very similar power levels, they just play a little bit differently. Of course, they're both a bit below Merlin though, because Merlin is fucking Merlin. Her pressure is acceptable, and once she does hit a level 5 mark, the burst and knockup alone on Argus is really strong, and add on the extra damage and chaos Argus can cause in fights, and it makes one of the most powerful mage ultimates in the game right now. And even without that, her 1 and 2 do very good damage, and she can clear really well after the first few levels. Plus the shield, while not a movement ability like Raijin and Merlin have, the sheer amount of health it gives makes it ridiculous if you're good at timing it to absorb a lot of damage. Okay, let's move on to that duo lane, starting with the ADCs. So first up is Jingwei. So with all the high pressure supports going around right now, practically carrying duo lane early game on their own, Xpal can often just ride it out and make it to his late game super safe, and as we all know, Jablanki's late game is a force to be feared for sure. His laning phase is acceptable enough, and if he has good setup from like a Bacchus or something, he can actually do a ton of work with those bowler autos in lane. And of course, once he does reach that teamfight stage later on, his damage is off the charts crazy, and his ult is one of the most powerful teamfighting abilities in the entire game. It can also flex really well into either a Kins and Pen build or a crit build depending on what the game calls for really. Both work extremely well on Xpal, and just in general he's a really great ADC pick right now. ADC number 2 is Jingwei. So Jingwei is still Jingwei. Easily the safest hunter you can throw into the duo lane, and she's extremely hard to put behind just because of that passive. Being able to fly back to lane for free and buy some items, or just if you get poked out you can heal in base and fly straight back, is always going to be extremely powerful. Not to mention she does really well versus the Bacchus menace we're seeing this season, because you can just fly straight out of his belly flop, which is his main engage, and not take any follow-up damage really. She is limited to crit builds for the most part. She doesn't really do very well with Pen and Kins builds. But given you can even go quad crit this season in the hyper late game by selling your boots, she can be extremely bursty once you have near 100% crit chance, and can always use her insane mobility to maneuver safely into and out of fights as she needs. And to round out the ADCs, it's Freya. So I'll say this just at the start, I think Freya also works very well as a mid laner still if that's the avenue you want to go down, but where she's shining brightest right now is in that duo lane, getting fed off of the high pressure supports being played right now and just steamrolling teams. The change to her 1 doesn't really seem to have nerfed her that much at all. It just changed her a bit away from that sort of 1 burst style to a more like damage over long periods of time, which is partly why I think she's better in ADC now than mid. But that does also mean she can slow for longer given she gets 5 autos that all apply a slow now. Freya is still Freya, and I don't really see her falling from grace anytime soon unless some major nerfs are swung her way. And the last of the duo laners and last of the video, supports. So the first one is Bacchus. Yeah, it turns out giving Bacchus free power, mitigations, anti-heal, and a stun at level 1 makes him just a teensy bit overpowered. The changes Bacchus received this season basically instantly made him a top pick ban once people realised what he was truly capable of, having that drink available at level 0. His level 1 through 5 is now basically the best of any Guardian, and he can bring so much pressure to the duo lane that it's extremely hard to compete with. Having great wave clear plus a stun at level 1 is just insane. I've even seen Bacchus have success in solo and jungle, and while it's decent, support is where he should be really. This fat man is primed and ready to fuck shit up this season for sure. The second support would be Fenrir. Yeah, the Fenrir craze still isn't over, boys. Similarly to Bacchus, Fenrir just dominates lane and almost no one can contest it. Being an assassin, he just brings that super scary early game damage and can often do more damage than his ADC early on, and really just carry the laning phase and snowball into an easy win due to how fed duo lane can get this season. Then of course just building full tank with Lono's mask and he's near unkillable, especially in that ultimate, and could just deliver free kills to his team on a silver platter. I don't really see Fenrir going away anytime soon unless duo lane pressure becomes much less prevalent than it is now, because as is right now, winning that duo lane is extremely important to the overall game, and aggressive supports like Fenrir and the Bacchus are just going to be really powerful. And the final support and god of the video, Geb. So Geb has seemed to be pretty consistently solid for a while now, probably due in part to Fenrir's existence as a prominent duo lane pick. Where gods like Bacchus and Fenrir want to wreck face and snowball the duo lane to an easy win, Geb shuts that down better than any other god, and it's the main way you're going to be able to deal with these high pressure duo lane support picks. Being able to shield out CCs like Fenrir's stun, Fenrir's ultimate, Bacchus' stun is always going to be game changing. And of course you can just straight up shield out the damage from all sources as well, which can't really be overstated. And in general, Geb just does extremely well at being a true supportive pick in teamfights, and if you can get him out of his rough laning phase early on, he's one of the best picks to win the late game. Alright, so that's all I've got for the best picks of every role for ranked and casuals as of patch 6.3. If this was useful to you, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss when I update these every few patches. And if you want to go that extra mile, then check out my Patreon page linked below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out, you nerds.